Okay, it is now 7:33. I'm calling the meeting of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee together. If there's no objection, I'd like to actually move around some of the items on our agenda so we can go and deal with the two things first before we go into talking about the budget. So the first thing, just to properly do this, I need somebody to move the amendment to the Noroton Heights Fire Department's bond resolution. I have Beth moving. Do I have somebody second? I have Louisa. Okay, so now we can discuss. It was brought up in our meeting that the property is not owned by the town of Darien. I mean, we did discuss that at the time. And the bond resolution that we prepared was approved by the gentleman who writes our bond resolutions, our attorney. And then when they were doing their final review, they realized, oops, this is a 503C, which required the change to the second whereas, which now reads, whereas the town desires to amend and restate the resolution to specify that the Noroton Heights Fire Department in the town is a 501c3 corporation, and to include a determination that the appropriation of funds for a grant to the Noroton Heights Fire Department is deemed to be in the public interest. So there's some other things that are going on there, but that's the main change. It also means that they will have to sign some papers for some tax work and other things like that for that particular bond, which they will do. Is there any questions or further discussion on this?
When you say they have to sign some papers for some tax work, does the town cover that, or does the fire department?
Bond resolution, the bond council stated there's some other forms that they have to sign as part of the bond resolution, which they will do. So Jen mentioned it in passing, so I'm just mentioning it here. The specific forms, honestly, I didn't ask. So if we're ready to vote, we can vote on that. Yes. All in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Dan, yell aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so that's unanimous. Okay. Here's the next one that we have is discuss and take action on the Bloom gift fund acceptance of $25,000. And that did go through that the Board of Selectmen was going to be addressing it tonight. They also were in good shape. So we're going to basically be reporting on how they're funding it. This is going to be a lot of smaller gifts that are going on. They're looking to put some bricks in one of the park areas, I think on Post Road, someplace. The bricks will be, I think, $325 to $400 something, and people will put their names on it and get their names on this brick area. Even though it's smaller gifts, the total amount they're anticipating to raise is $25,000. So we are both approving that they can raise as gifts up to $25,000 and authorize the expenditure of up to $25,000 in this fund. It will be kept separately. I spoke to Jen, the who is now just the town administrator, because apparently today is the first day of a new director of finance. I haven't met him, but he'll be at tomorrow's meeting, which may have him say, "Why did I come here?" But still, the fact of the matter is that so we will not allow that fund to go into deficit. On certain funds, you can actually spend money in anticipation that it would be covered. This one will not be such fun. So, but I think it's like $5,000 for the bricks, including the mason work and other things of what they anticipated cost. There's two areas that they've identified that will be spent out of this year's budget. And if it goes a little bit higher, there's some money in the contingency account that should allow to do some coverage. So we're only dealing with the accounting for it. And that's basically talking about the accounting. One thing I did ask of the Board of Selectmen and Jen was to have an exit strategy. So if there's a year of basically dormant fundraising in there and we're not collecting anything to close out the fund. So we're not cleaning up old funds again that are just hanging around. So I don't anticipate that to be the case for the next 3 years at least, but something we should keep in mind. Do I have somebody to move that just so that do I have, okay, I have Louisa moving. Do I have a second? I have Bill Dunn. Is there any questions or comments on that? We lost Dan, putting Dan back in. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Waiting till Dan returns. Dan is back. All those in favor? Say
Hi.
aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Unanimous. Dispatches union contract. This was preliminary. We needed the, this is covering 9 dispatchers. They previously were in the town hall contract, and there were a lot of little nuances put into the town hall contract to accommodate their position, which really didn't make sense being them in town hall, but we had no other place to put them. They unionized, came up with a union for themselves. I believe last week they approved a union contract. I believe there's 7 there now. It's going before the Board of Selectmen today. Usually they start that discussion in executive session, then comes out. Historically, we do not get the executive summary or the union contract until they come out of the Board of Selectmen comes out of executive session. Since we have a meeting the same time, we're not there. Otherwise, we could have started asking questions then and had copies. I should get both the contract itself as well as the executive summary tomorrow morning. And from there, we will address it at our Wednesday meeting. For those that are new, union contracts are a little bit interesting. We are not voting to approve. We're voting not to reject. So it's not that we can make any changes, but if we do reject, it goes into mediation. And historically, towns like Darien do not do well in mediation. I don't know any of the things that are going on in it. I haven't Rob Cardone was actually the Board of Finance representative on that negotiations. Basic belief from the police chief, as well as Rob, is that this union contract will assist in our hiring for the future of keeping that somewhat fully staffed. So we're not voting on that tonight, but I wanted to give you some background that as soon as I get the contract, please feel free to read it. If you have any questions, get them to me sooner rather than later so I can send them over to Jen and say, please answer these questions. I don't know what the increases are or what the terms or anything are compared to what they had. Okay. We can have that. So now the finance discussions. There were two meetings last week. There was some conversation on one of the on some of the attributes. I do want to go through what they discussed. And Jenny, you can turn off your mic and chip in whenever you feel like it. I got to figure out how to share. Let's see. It should be around here someplace. Or here. Here. Okay. So I'm going to go through some of the documents that they have here. This one, you know, you're not supposed to give the punchline of the joke before you actually give the joke, but I'm going right to the punchline. We do capital, we collect two things when we do our tax and our mill rate. Part of it goes to capital, so we tax for the capital that's in the budget, and that goes directly to the reserve fund for capital non-recurring expenditures, and then we tax for the general fund, which pays for debt service, library, town operations, and the Board of Ed. All right. So based upon where they are, let's see if I can get to it. The tax on capital, we have an increase of about 630. If you can just go through, the 12 million is taking out the Weed Beach and the Pear Tree Point projects, which we'll deal with later on in the year. We don't have final estimates on that. But those are the only things that'll be bonded. We also are expecting a fire engine to come in sometime next year as well, which will also be bonded. So the discussion was, which we'll go to, that the based upon receiving money back from expenses of approximately 1.1 million from the Board of Selectmen budget, primarily driven by some vacancies that we had. And then we had 1.7 million coming back on the revenue side. The revenue wasn't just investment income, which we've been lucky to have over the last couple of years. It's also that we've actually been collecting a lot more on our taxes. We're going to go through that later. And on our supplemental tax on the automobiles was much higher than what we anticipated. And there was another revenue stream there. So the 1.7 is over there. That brought it up to 2.8. And which we'll get into further discussion on Wednesday. ECR was originally budgeted at 65. The original, then they were estimating that they were going to get about 60%. The state put in $40 million. The anticipated return is 72%, generating about a $500,000 increase in their reimbursement. And there's two parts to that. Number one, the rate that we get, but also when they're calculating out the rate, they have to estimate what the expenses that we're going to be delivering to the state to get that reimbursement. And that has also increases. So sometimes, even though we're getting a lower rate, we're still close to what we had budgeted. If they get back the 550 to 550 in their reimbursement that's anticipated, they are sitting with a $460,000 surplus in the Board of Ed budget. Now, there has been some conversation of whether or not they're going to set up a non-lapsing account, whether they would not pre-buy, or whether or not it's coming back to the general fund. The Board of Finance is anticipating that that money is coming back. So that's the other 400 or so thousand. That brings us up to about 3.2 million coming back to the general fund from projected from this year's budget. That's going on in 25. The Board of Finance has decided to take 3 million of that amount and pay down capital so that where it started out at 5,900,000 is now down to 2.9. That's still a 28% increase in what we did last year for capital. And the mill rate for that is 26 basis points. On the other side, total taxes that we have to raise from the budget is up approximately $10.5 million, which is a 6.45% increase. The mill rate on that would be a 15.5. That means that the combined total of the two generates an increase of 5.51% on an increase of the mill rate as we stand today. I'm going to go through some of the things that they're going to be talking about tomorrow. And again, Jenny, feel free to jump in. Jen did a quick assessment on the $1 million for assessed value, which is approximately a $1.43 million market value. Would be an increase on your taxes of $809. So with everything we're doing, there's a couple of things that we have to manage to. So before I go to that one, let's see if I have one more. Okay, so here it is. So there's two things that we have to look at. One is the Board of Finance policy, where they say that the minimum value is about 12% of our actual general funds to what we have to raise for taxes. We want it to be no less than 12%. But from the information I have, agencies would prefer that we're up at about the 17-18% area. In addition, Moody's wants us to be at 20% of our liquidity. And I'm going to go to the Moody's calculation just briefly to explain it. Based upon the calculation that Jen has done, with taking $3 million, the Moody's calculation brings us to 21.43, which is still above their 20% requirement. So at $3 million, we're not getting close to it. And the goal is not to exceed what we're getting back in. There is some discussion on the Board of Finance as to they all believe that it's coming back. I'm not sure that it is. So, and I've been vocal about that. But, that's part of what's going on. Here's the open items for the, that they'll be deciding. We did have an additional reduction in the full-time salary based upon filling the director of finance at a lower position. There's the town administrator's budget. There's 20,000 for a sidewalk consultant. I'm in favor of keeping the sidewalk consultant. This is consistent with what some of the parents wanted to look at. This is a gentleman who just got done doing Stratford, but like other committees, it's been 10 years since we did a sidewalk study, but other committees that we have, we always have experts on it. So on Great Island, you have Reed Hildebrand. On any of the building committees, you have a general contractor, you have a contract coordinator, and they're actually executing against a plan. The sidewalk committee actually would need to have somebody who understands all the ins and outs, topography, easements, state roads and other laws, utilities, all these other attributes, so that as they're developing a plan for the sidewalks, you have somebody who could assist the group put together on that. The Pacer AI is tracking the movement out of parks and where they're coming from and where they're going. There is some discussion on that based upon privacy. The Board of Ed, I'm not anticipating a change to the Board of Ed budget. It's still though there. This year we borrowed 5 million more than what was originally in the budget. That has increased the debt service by $309,000. We're also, though, investing that into STIF, so there may be a wash. What we did is on HHR, we went out instead of the 12-month usual, we've done 15 months, is what's proposed by the Board of Finance. And there are certain requirements of what has to be spent down, all of which we seem to be able to do. The other project that's had some discussion for $36,000 is the Park and Rec Financial Sustainability, which is basically doing a cost accounting on all of the aspects of the parks. Hopefully we could see the methodology and apply it to other parts of the town. But when asked if this could be expanded, that was one of the things Jenny was talking about and others supported. The fact of the matter is that the answer is, if we did expand it, we'd have to pay a new fee to that. So they're still questioning whether or not it's worthwhile this year to expand on that bid. So the other things you're seeing here on the Park and Rec, which wasn't reflected in the 12 mil, but the Weed Beach was reduced by 589, and Pear Tree was reduced by approximately 3.4 million, going back to the last bid that we have from it. So I expect both of those to change. Let me move this around. We did that. Moody's. So Moody's is a slightly different calculation. It's a liquidity calculation. So while the Board of Finance is looking at what is the funds in the general fund compared to the total amount of revenue we have to raise, Moody's looks at it slightly different. It looks at all the funds that we have in town. So that would include what's sitting in the sewer, what's sitting in capital projects, the Great Island acquisition. They still have about 4 million they haven't spent. And so they come up with the total balance of about $50 million. They also look at all the revenues across that line. That includes all the assessments, other things like that are coming in. I wish I could tell you what the non-major is. I do not know at this time. But that comes down to with revenues and other things, we're approximately 37% on the total cash and investments compared to revenues, and we're with $3 million approximately at 20% when we're comparing the other aspect of liquidity to that, both of which meet the Moody's mark. So that covers most of the budget. I did a quick calculation on what somebody on the Board of Finance asked, what would it take to get to a 5% increase? And that means that the needle would have to move by 700,000. I mean, while I appreciate the Board of Finance reviewing the projects that I've mentioned, in the past, we really weren't spending a lot of time on items that wouldn't move the needle. Even if two of those were moved from the budget, it may affect the budget by $500,000. So it's not really creating that much of a change in the increase. But the other thing that's outstanding is that there is the Reserve Fund for Capital Non-Recurring Expenditures Reserve that's part under the control of the Board of Finance. The beginning balance is about 485,000. There's two items coming in that will make it 470,000 anticipated. The Board of Finance does have the option to move money out of that account to also pay down capital. And that's up to them if they want to do it. Let's see, I wanted to go to one other thing. Tax collection rate. So what we do on the tax collection rate is we look at the collection for the last, the actual collection for the last 5 years. And then in the past, we've been reducing it by 25 basis points. But there's several things. The grant list is created as values as of October 1st of the prior year. Between October 1st and the billing, the actual final levy, there are always adjustments, sometimes up, sometimes down. These don't seem, if you have some reductions, you also have, as an example, we put in a new kitchen. It was not in at the October time frame, and we were notified at the end of December that our assessment went up by 50 grand. So the fact of the matter is that that's in addition to what will be levied that wasn't in the original mill rate. And there's also reductions that occur. But our actual collection rate then against what the levy is has been higher by 2 basis points than what it was in prior years. And so there was discussion to change the rate. We've been charging 99.48, which was basically 25 basis points off the 99.73 that we were getting. There was discussion to use a collection rate of 99.65 or 99.6. And for now, 99.6 is using the collection rate. That still gives us a little bit of, when I'm saying we, the town, a little bit of flexibility. Pierre mentioned that, as several of the others in the audience talked about the need for flexibility, because number one, this isn't going to be a typical 3 to 3.5 increase in the mill rate, which has been going on. Plus, there's uncertainty in the economy, and so should we end up in a recession or other things, we typically have a lower collection. So, but right now it's at 99.6 for this model. This also, the one that I'm showing now, is the supplemental motor vehicle. We've been, pardon me, we've been collecting a significant amount more than what we've had in budget. So, and we're doing it again this year. So, that's part of the funds that were generated, for why we ended up with 1.7 million in revenue. There's also supplemental real estate that we have, and that also yielded some significant funds. So that's where they are in the budget. I'm going to stop the share. Are there any questions or anything on that?
Hey, Jack.
Yeah.
Assuming I didn't miss it, perhaps you can explain to everyone who wasn't listening how, and tell me if I explain this wrong, because I think I'm going to explain it wrong. So when they go in with this underestimate of the collection rate, what they're doing is they're building in a surplus in the budget for the end of the year, right? You know, they're being conservative, but they're actually overtaxing the Darien residents at the time, right? Conceptually. That's not my point yet, but so you've got that money that's sitting there. Then when you look at our liquidity ratio and our need to build up cash in the general reserve to protect it, if I followed correctly, we can use that extra to kind of build up our general fund so that as the town is growing and our budget is growing and everything's growing, we're creating some extra cash reserve to allow that growth without hitting our Moody's ratio, liquidity ratio.
You're absolutely right. I'm just going to tweak it a little bit.
That's fine.
The reason why we were doing 25 basis points is we do have fluctuation in past years of what the collection rate was. Also, sometimes if you have like a big assessment year and the challenges that take place, we could see a significant change in what the original grand list that we're using, that was as of October 1st, but issued January 31st. To when we actually levied taxes. So that's part of the other reason why it's built in. It's sort of a cushion to account for changes in the grand list from October to that. However, and it's usually between 300 to 400,000 is what I estimated in the past for what it is, but I haven't done it on a bigger grand list. But it is, as you properly stated, it is overtaxing our residents because we're lowering the amount that we expect so that we do have that reserve just in case we do not collect the amounts that are there. But otherwise, you were spot on. I don't think I changed anything. I just added a little color.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, you're spot on. Any other comments? Jenny, did we put you to sleep yet?
Not yet.
Did I do a fair job explaining the items that you have before you tomorrow night?
Yep. Yeah, we're you hit on everything. So
I will let you know I'm in favor of the of keeping the sidewalk, because that's been raised by the Public Works Committee and by parents, and I just have a feeling that that study, it will not go forward without having the consultant there. And so I'd rather people here know we can't put a sidewalk there because XYZ, or yes, we can put sidewalks here for a longer term plan and updating what was done 10 years ago. That's just, and it's
yeah,
only,
I think there was a question on
this consultant setting up criteria for the next stage of a plan.
Right.
So I think that was the question of like, do you really need a plan to get a plan? Right?
Yeah.
Do you really need to do what's the criteria that you'd want to look for? And I know I was not at the meeting on Thursday.
No, I
watched
realize.
the discussion, and I understand how, you know, John, for our first selectman, talked about building committees and kind of taking a similar approach, but getting a little more expertise before the building committee gets formed. I don't really know where it's going to shake out. I don't think anybody is against the interest in developing a pedestrian plan. It's just more a question of what does this 20,000 get us versus like on Great Island, we hired a $1.4 million planning and consulting team, right?
Yep.
So
My experience from running several major projects at Chase, including the acquisition and Chase's entry into Connecticut, is that if you don't create a plan for the plan, you don't get the right plan. So part of project management is knowing that you have to plan to create the plan. And so, the 20,000 with setting up the criteria and then working with us to get that kicked off, I think is important. Otherwise, we may run into the same place that we were before in the prior sidewalk project, which was really good. But unfortunately, we couldn't do all the things because we didn't have the criteria set for us. So
yeah, as just an exercise, I actually dropped it into ChatGPT and it gave me 10 great criteria pillars. I'm like, okay, this sounds like a really, it had everything to do with safety and accessibility and proximity to I would say high traffic areas and plan of conservation or planning and zoning. It actually was a pretty good generation. So yeah, I think the concern, at least at the Board of Finance, was in a particularly this is a sort of the highest we've ever seen the budgets come in.
yeah, but 20,000 isn't moving a needle.
No, but we got a few of those. We got 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 20,000.
No, you have the max that you guys are talking about is $76,000, and you need 110 to move the needle.
Well,
So
like
I
there's
think you
also
have
the
other
Board of
things.
Finance contingency.
Yeah, that I think the Board of Finance contingency with 470,000, moving 200 to 250 is an option that doesn't change anything because you do closeouts again in September, which should fill the pipeline again.
Yeah,
So that we've done in the past, and that's not a problem.
Yeah, I
But,
think that we're just taking a very, it
we're
the
over
devil's in the
5.
details, right? We got to make sure we're getting granular, not to the point of driving everybody crazy, but and this is a very difficult year. So
Yeah, I just think that, look, Jim and I were having a debate whether or not it's the real cost to run the town. Look, there's still efficiencies in both budgets that need to be looked at. All right. We're just not doing it in time for Tuesday, tomorrow. And I'm not proposing to cut anything on the floor of the RTM. There may be 1 or 2 adjustments that do come in where we have a better knowledge of. And if that comes in, they'll pass it to F&B and we'll do that on the floor of the RTM. But other than that, I think that's pretty much done. Are there any other questions? I mean, we have Jenny here who can answer some of those things so that you're not just listening to me. Pierre was also at all these meetings also.
No testing.
To keeps me company. No other questions? Okay, so I want to end this we're going to do minutes at the next meeting. I want to end this meeting with congratulations to the Yukon women. It was a very good win. Not that, and I was happy that they beat South Carolina. But the other thing I'm going to point out is on the NCAA that the men right now lost by 2 points to Florida. And so they've played the closest game that Florida has. Unfortunately, it was very early on, but it still said even though the men didn't have a great year, depending upon the outcome of tonight, they played a heck of a game against Florida. So with that, if there's no other business to discuss, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have Pierre, I have Peter D. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Jenny, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
You're welcome back anytime.
I will, you'll see me.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Aye.
Good night.